Welcome to our debate, Rethinking the Festival. I'm John Allison, the editor of Opera Magazine, sitting here in the magazine's office in London, and very sad indeed not to be in Aix this summer. Happily, our four panelists are all busy in Aix, and before I introduce them, I'll outline a few of the avenues we aim to explore. Obviously, we'll talk about what they should have been doing here this summer and what they are doing now. Since it's clear by now that this year's festival is taking place under very unusual, not to say unique conditions, do these conditions give us pause to reflect on the very raison d'etre of a festival, and this festival in particular? It's never missed an edition since 1948, when it was founded, when it was part of a wider movement to build festivals out of the destruction of the Second World War. So what sort of festivals will grow out of the current crisis? Now, this is undeniably a huge and catastrophic crisis. But when it comes to our musical world, I wonder whether it has merely exposed another crisis that has been bubbling away underneath. And this is something else we might explore. Though, of course, we'll try not to be too negative, or just to say, well, it was a nice run of public performances between the 18th century and March 2020. It was good while it lasted. No, I think something new has to come out of this. But what is the future? And with so much digital creativity, we also have to ask whether we have already pressed the fast forward button, as may be the case when it comes to things like traditional shops and offices. Now, with the festival director, Pierre Audi, himself here, and the three main conductors who were invited for this year's edition, we'll have a chance to ask about their experiences in the last few months, indeed, and see how everybody has got on. So to get to our very distinguished panel, really so many conductors and a director, I don't know what the collective noun for this is, but I will try to direct them here. Our guests really need no introduction, so instead I will ask them each to summarize their connection to Aix in 2020, and in tactful alphabetical order of first names, let's start with Pierre Audi.
Thank you, John. I'm the festival director, and this was going to be my second edition I'm responsible for. I've prepared for the last 4 years, actually a run of 5 festivals. I think the conductors who are here know this very well because they are returning to the festival with other productions, hopefully in the future, because I believed in continuity and deepening artistic relationships. And luckily, moving some of those productions is slightly easier because we are hopefully still there in the next few years, and we can just swap titles. This edition started being programmed 4 years ago. It's really a very sad realization that we've had to cancel it. The festival is also a construction of several titles together, speaking to each other. I think that construction we will never see again. We can't really transpose the festival as it was in 20 and move it to another place. We have to break it up. But again, you know, my feeling was from day one to not be too pessimistic and to really think as much as I could with everybody about creative ways to look at each project which has different problems and try to imagine how to save those projects, because that was for me a crucial parameter. There are also much bigger factors about the rest of the festival. The digital edition that we have put together between 6th of July and the 14th of July displays also everything else the festival has done, will do, and is for.
Thank you. And now we have 3 wonderful conductors. First, Simon Rattle.
Hello. This would have been my 6th festival. I was here in the last century with the Macropolis case, and early in the century, 4 years running, doing The Ring. And this year would have been Wozzeck, a piece I've loved since my early 20s when I first did it. It was to be directed and will in the future be directed by Simon McBurney. And of course, it makes me laugh to hear Pierre say that this festival started planning 4 years ago, because it must have taken nearly all of those 4 years to get the totally brilliant but the impossible to pin down Simon McBurney actually on board. And we've had, of course, the most wonderful conversations already about what it would be. And now, of course, he looks at the piece and, like every other piece, it throws out entirely different thoughts, particularly when you think of the situation of Wozzeck and his almost forced illness. It's a completely fascinating thought. And when we do come to it in the next years, it will be an entirely different piece. But then so will almost everything else we do after this reset.
Thank you. Susanna Mälkki.
Thank you, Pierre Audi, and for all of you. I mean, I'm here doing my debut as opera conductor, and I've come to do the world premiere of Kaija Saariaho's newest opera, Innocence, which is a remarkable piece, and it will blow everybody's mind when it will be finally out in the world. It's very interesting also because it's a new piece for Kaija with a new team. The libretto is written by the Finnish novelist Sofi Oksanen, and the stage director will be Simon Stone. So it's really a new, I would say, a new page in Kaija's operatic oeuvre. Shattering and devastatingly tragic and powerful story, and the music is really, really extraordinary and very moving, and it's really going to be something extraordinary. And this piece also, I mean, as Pierre Audi was saying, it had actually a fantastic chain of performances, beautifully planned over the upcoming season, and of course this like a big domino also fell apart. But we have been miraculously able, but Pierre and his team have been able to reconstruct the runs, and it will be seeing the world. It's an extraordinary piece, and I'm so happy to be doing it.
Thomas Hengelbrock.
Yeah, very happy to be here with all of you, and thank you, Pierre, for fighting so much in the last months to make it possible that at least we can do with the Balthasar Neumann Ensemble our debut in X. We have been so much looking forward to do the Così fan tutte, which I already conducted, I think, in 6 performances, in 6 productions over the last 25 years. And I can't get enough from the music of Mozart with his embracing love, world-embracing love. But at least I'm so happy to make this concert. All of us, we have faced very difficult weeks and months, and it's very much comforting now to do this concert.
Before we find our way towards some of the topics, towards the discussion, looking at the problems that everybody faces, Pierre, perhaps if you could fill us in. Obviously, there's no time to talk about the huge process of the deliberations with the artistic partners, the sponsors, the politicians. The outcome of the cancellation must have been devastating. But just tell us from a personal point of view, at what point did the worries about whether you would have the Summers Festival turn to the absolute realization that you had to cancel?
My initial plan in March was actually to try to save some of those productions and actually rehearse them and then stream them. And that was really my first plan. But as time developed, it became clear that legally speaking, we could not take the risk of planning such an operation with governments being uncertain themselves about what to allow and not allow, what to recommend and not recommend. We had huge uncertainties with regard to travel. All countries were reacting to COVID-19 with a different timing. So we felt suddenly part of the world because, you know, our artists are coming from all over the planet. We had to stay optimistic, but at the same time realistic. And it's actually the first major speech of Emmanuel Macron, the president, that canceled the festival. He actually used the word festival in his speech, which I think is the first time a president of the Republic uses the word festival, acknowledges that festivals exist. But he, in the very same speech, said festivals cannot take place. And with that, sentence, it became clear that we couldn't actually maintain our hope to do much. And yet I didn't give up. With everybody, I wanted first to save a certain activity, also to help justify support staying with us. We have a wonderful team at the festival working visibly and invisibly on many, many aspects of our activity. A large part of our activity could be done online, like the work of the Academy and some other aspects of our activity. And we have managed to invent a form called La Scène Numérique, a digital festival, in which we could actually also present live work. One of the things that mattered to me also enormously was to try to do our best to remunerate the artists generously and help to save, this financial catastrophe for everybody. Somehow it was possible, and Thomas played a big part in this because we were on a daily basis in touch. He was an arch optimist. I mean, he came with the German approach. Football is going to restart. We have to make music and so on. He helped me to really stay cheerful. We would send each other articles back and forth, good news, bad news, whatever. But somehow it felt good because our activity, we don't have, like Salzburg, 100 concerts and many chamber music and a large number of recitals. We have a relatively limited activity in terms of recitals and concerts, but it felt right to try to save those recitals and those concerts. That's what we decided to do, and to invite the artists to do this in Aix, in front of historical sites, like the Archevêché, the cloisters, the Cour Meunier-le-Pède, the stage of the Archevêché where Cozy was going to be staged, and to have the artists come to Aix and make music. The Orchestra of the Opéra de Lyon will also provide a concert which will be filmed in Lyon. And we tried, Simon knows this, to bring the LSO even to do a concert. But that was simply too ambitious. It was just too difficult in the end. But they will play from St. Luke's in London. Sadly, not with Simon, because Simon is accompanying his wife Madalena here in Aix, where he cannot travel freely. So he would have to go into quarantine to conduct his own orchestra. So his colleague, Duncan Ward, will conduct the LSO from St. Luke's, so that they will at least be with us in this edition as a sort of gesture, musical gesture, which for me was very important because they were playing together with Balthasar Neumann a very important role as the two major guest orchestras of the festival this year.
Susanna, you are at the center of really the biggest knock-on effect of all of this in a way, because it's a five-cornered co-production of the world premiere of Kaija Saariaho's new opera. In fact, I know it's not even the only knock-on effect we're seeing here this summer, because Barry Kosky's production of The Golden Cockerel was due to have opened and then gone to Lyon, where there has been reshuffling. But the really remarkable thing, I think, is that you are here and with the production team and the cast, and will take it as far as a piano dress rehearsal. Orchestral sonorities are so important in Saariaho, but tell us what your impressions of the new piece are.
Where to start? I mean, you're absolutely right about the orchestration being a central part of the colors of the music, but there are so many elements which are extremely strong already. To start with the libretto, I think not only is it a very powerful story, but it's also, there are so many aspects of it. It addresses so many subjects at once. There's a tragedy, there's a trauma, and then all the roles, all the characters in the opera are trying to survive, actually. They have their own mechanism of coping with the trauma they have faced, and there are surprising elements. There are different temporalities which are converging in the opera. I mean, the structure of it is incredibly strong. Musically, it's obvious to me that Kaija has been extremely inspired by the libretto, and also when we discussed it, I was saying, well, you have written music which I've never heard before from you. And her reply was like, I had to. You know, the story is so strong that she had to find new ways of expression. So there is that, and this all comes through even without the orchestra. But of course, we can't wait to have the orchestra.
Will it be difficult for you to stop after the piano dress rehearsal? Will it be a particularly tough sensation that you don't normally have?
Yes, it will be tough, but on the other hand, actually, what is quite special, I feel that the story is so emotionally charged that in the end we may be grateful for having 1 year to digest it all, because it's so, I mean, there are some moments in the opera which are, at least for me personally, they're just so terribly sad, or, you know, so moving that actually in the end we may be able to give even more devastating performance when we are ourselves, because it's a lot of things to process, and when it comes together with the music, and that's again what brings me to the subject of the libretto and the music, that when you really feel that those two are connected, then they are both becoming more. There is that. Then there are many other elements. There are lots of different languages. So in a way, there's also the subject of being a foreigner or being misplaced, being in a place where either other people make you feel that you don't belong, or you have that from inside, you know. So psychologically, there's so much going on, and every single role has really a journey.
Are we allowed to know yet where the actual creation, the world premiere, will take place?
Am I allowed to say it?
Well, we hope somehow to continue to reproduce the sequence that we had worked out, but nothing is certain until it's certain, especially in COVID times.
Simon, in the Sunday Times of London recently, you were quite apocalyptic, really, saying that COVID-19 was not a pause, but a full stop. Do we need a new model rather than the old one? Or do we turn the lights off and wait until a vaccine is found? Or perhaps best of all, do we grab the opportunity to remind everyone of why music and culture are so important?
Well, I think this is really a time for us all to be evangelists. We've all had time to think. We've all had time to reset. What's been very strange for me has been just in the couple of previous weeks to coming here, I was both part of a very distanced recording in Munich with the Bayerische Rundfunk. The next week in the Czech Republic with the Czech Philharmonic, an orchestra sitting normally, all of whom had been tested, with an audience of 500, all wearing masks. In fact, if we had done it this week, we could have had an audience of 1,000. And it just depends how each country has managed this crisis. One of the things about the musicians in Britain is they are very quick on their feet and they are very flexible. And whatever we can do, we will do at the moment. I mean, it makes us very optimistic to know that something is happening in Aix. What is actually very touching, even though I will not be able to get there to conduct it myself, is that the concert the London Symphony Orchestra do for Aix will actually be the first time the whole orchestra is together. So that has a kind of poetry about it.
Tell us, how did it actually feel in Prague to be in front of an orchestra and an audience?
Once I'd got over the terrible shock of people doing something unthinkable, which was to shake my hand, this is something I had really forgotten about. I was talking to Susanna today and realizing, yeah, close people, we hugged each other, but we certainly hadn't shaken each other's hands. It was astonishing. And if you ever need a memory of how important this is to you and what it says to us and what terrible junkies we are of this art, this concert was something. And the feeling that music says so much more than any words can, and how much we needed it, was almost painful, an ache of pain and pleasure. But again, the optimism that in a place where it's being dealt with properly, that we do have a future. But in each country, we have to fight for our future. We have to fight that people actually scientifically look at the facts of distancing, for instance, not at the superstitions. as our government is so fond of saying, follow the science. But actually, the molecules do move the same speed in every country. And so we can actually trust the research that's being done.
Thomas, talking about symbolism, there's a lot of symbolism in your concert. I mean, first of all, Beethoven Fifth is symbolic in so many ways. And of course, it's a way of marking the composer's anniversary this year. And then there's Così fan tutte, which is especially symbolic in Aix, since it inaugurated the first festival. So there's a lot of history in your program, and was that deliberate, I guess?
Indeed, it was, because after the first depression, also I had after let's say 3 or 4 weeks, when I realized how difficult the times will be, we fight it really for this concert. What is a big shame also that we all miss this Beethoven year. I mean, not to play Beethoven in this year with all these incredible works is really something the world is now missing. And so it was very important for me to bring on the program the Fifth Symphony of Beethoven and combine it with some pieces of Così fan tutte and other pieces from Mozart. These composers, especially Mozart, is probably the composer I conducted the most, with Bach together and then Beethoven. And both of them are my food, my daily food. I can't imagine to live without them. It's not only symbolic for this concert we are doing, but it's also our answer, and Pierre's answer, and my answer, and the answer of the musicians to this difficult situation. And if we have a look to the biography of Beethoven, he had to face so incredible problems. He was nearly to kill himself. He had so much health problems, and he was going over this and producing the most incredible pieces. So we have to continue. We have to fight. He's our hero. Mozart is our hero. They are 10 million times stronger than any COVID virus. And we have to remind each other to the incredible power and the incredible energy, the unbelievable love music gives to our life.
Pierre, it's tempting to say that it's only really when a festival is cancelled that one stops to think what it means about what a festival is for. Now, I know this has not ever really been the case for you or in Aix historically, because although festivals ought to be different, in some places they've become quite blurred, part of a sort of international touring economy, and they've lost their identity. But that's never happened in Aix. I mean, for one thing, it's a great place. There is this, shall we say, the estate agent's mantra of location, location, location. It's a special place, and a lot of the great festivals have those, Salzburg, Savonlinna, Santa Fe. Aix seems to do all sorts of other things. It's kept its individuality, I suppose, through partnerships with regular orchestras and artists. But how do you think Aix has kept its individuality, and what does that tell you now about what the festival means?
There are a few very special things that are associated with Aix. I think the conductors, especially Simon and Thomas, know that it's maybe one of the very few festivals, but in its entirety it could be seen that way, where an orchestra can come with its conductor. That's really very special. We don't have a house orchestra where we invite conductors to come. We start with artistic partnerships, and we associate other conductors, like Susanna was going to conduct the LSO this year in Kaya's opera, and so the LSO was going to play concerts with both Simon and Susanna, as well as 2 major operas. Thomas also was there with his orchestra to do also a concert, and an orchestra, a concert that would be conducted by somebody else. That aspect of music making is very important and very unique, and I try to emphasize and strengthen that even more as a character of the festival. The second one is that it's the only festival in the world that co-produces everything it does. Bayreuth and Salzburg actually don't co-produce. They create their own productions, and it's very rare that the production is seen in other places. With Aix, everything is co-produced. It goes somewhere else, in most cases with the same artist, but sometimes not. That makes it a very special place. It's also complicated, the COVID-19 crisis, because all these co-productions, we are one of the aspects we had to retain. We had to fight to retain our subsidies, our co-productions, our donations. But the co-production aspect is one of the things that makes X also unique. The opera productions are central to what we do, but in the last 20 years, the festival has been developing a sort of think tank, which has brought it a fantastic gift: youth. Young people can come to X. The high prices of some of the seats are not off-putting because there is a tremendous educational activity that is promoted and developed by the festival, which has allowed it to stay young and to offer artists from every discipline, not just singers, but conductors, dramaturgs, designers, directors, and also journalists even we introduced last year to the Academy, the chance to take part in reflection on what opera is and what the future of opera is. And I think this has been a tremendous elixir for the festival, to stay young and to stay relevant, to stay diverse, to stay hyper-international. And I think this richness is happening with 150 artists during this digital festival now. They are all taking part in the activities that were intended to happen in X with mentors and various other situations. Luckily, we've been able to hang on to all of that. But in the flow and the way the festival works, this activity has a wonderful effect on the buzz of how the productions function during the 20 days that the festival plays. We have a pre-festival, we have a warm-up called Aix en Juin, which is really a gift to the city. And in that festival, we stage operas in the streets, we have film connections, we have workshops of all kinds, and we finish that cycle with a large concert on the Cours Mirabeau, which is the Champs-Élysées of Aix, which was going to be the LSO this year, with Simon Rattle conducting Gershwin. And so a little fragment of that will be retained in the concert that will come from London. But that's always a wonderful event to kick off the festival. And then the other aspect that is remarkable about this festival is that all 5 productions open one after the other in a sequence of 4 to 5 days, which is really a tour de force for the technique and for everybody on the teams. And that's actually unique in the world.
Thomas, a question for you, because you've run a festival, you've been the music director of an opera house, you've been the music director of a modern symphony orchestra, and of course of your period orchestra. So which of these sorts of organizations, or what sort of organization, is best equipped to get through the crisis? Who will come out of it fastest?
It's not easy to answer this question properly. We don't know this. On the first hand, the German orchestras, the German fixed orchestras, they're in a quite comfortable position because they are paid through this crisis, as you know. The freelance orchestras, it's much more difficult for them. For the Balthasar Neumann Ensemble and my choir, which I run since 29 years, it's extremely difficult. We have just 3% of subsidy. So we play 97%. We have to look for all the money coming up from concerts, operas, concert fee and sponsors. But I'm quite optimistic that all the ensembles who has a quality and the will to survive and a will to bring best quality, all of them will survive. I'm quite sure.
Susanna, I was going to ask you because it seems as if the old, what you might say, linguistic signposts such as BC and PC are going to carry new meanings rather than the ones we're used to. They will be before COVID and after COVID. I mean, this is really a big line in the middle of everything. I think it's fair to say that the music business will be changed forever, but how quickly do you think theatres and concert halls will be able to rely on audiences resuming their former pattern, their former habits? We hope that people will be hungry to get back into the halls and theatres, but do you think this will happen?
It will happen, of course, ultimately, but every country has its own situation, and since the music business is a global one, we have to adjust differently in different places. But I'm sure that there will be the time when we are back to the so-called normal. Something positive about it is that I'm sure we all realized the deeper value of coming together and play and share this artistic moment. At least for me, I mean, there has been almost too much time for so much reflection on what we do and why we do it and what we want to achieve. And as Simon was saying earlier, like, it's overwhelming when you actually feel the emotion and the energy of other people again. And this is something that we all miss. How to then arrive to this without taking too many risks or having people at ease. For example, we may have regulations for orchestras that they can play together, and if there's a distance of 1 meter or 2 meters, and then of course the repertoire is restricted for some time because of that, the number of people who can fit onto the stage. But then also whether the audience feels comfortable sitting close to each other again, or for example in Finland we have been discussing, should we do concerts without an interval, because it's actually getting into the hall and out of the hall to the lobby area. That's where the most dangerous part is, and should we be wearing masks or not, and all these questions. So there will certainly be a transition time, and we don't know how long it is, and I'm afraid that in some countries it may last quite long. And also what is really tragic, of course, is what Thomas already referred to, that when the financing is much more directly dependent on the income of the audience, then the consequences will be paid for a really, really long time. And I'm thinking of the North America and the Great Britain, where the orchestras finance differently. So I'm definitely optimistic, but we also have to be patient, I'm afraid.
We're very happy that you've always been such a champion of Haydn symphonies, because there are going to need to be more Haydn symphonies than Mahler symphonies for a while. Are you looking at revising programs at all?
Look, I think every single one of us has spent the last months making endless contingency plans, some of which are thrown out by even the end of the day, let alone the end of the week. But in some ways, it's been very refreshing to have to think, what will we play? How will we be able to play it? For instance, in this time of Black Lives Matter, I mean, this is a real opportunity to look at both repertoire from this community and performers from this community in a way that we might not have risked in another time. I was about to do the premiere of the sadly missed George Walker, who died in his 90s not so long ago. This was going to be at the Proms, but now we are now looking at some of these other types of repertoire. I think a piece like Strauss's Bourgeois Gentilhomme, which manages to sound like a whole orchestra while being 35 people, these pieces will get a lot more played. And of course, we will be returning a lot to classical music. I mean, Haydn, of all composers, is the person who needs people to be sitting near each other. We will have to find really new ways of working together. We played in Munich the Mozart Grand Partita, what we call the 13 Serenade, and each of these players was 3 meters apart, as were the rules 3 weeks ago. Now it would be 2 or 1.5. But this was really like sending smoke signals over to the next mountain. You have to learn a new way to play. But I think it will be absolutely fascinating. And we have to do what we can. Some of it will be without audiences, but part of our job then will be to persuade audiences that it is safe and to make it as well as it possibly can be. And I absolutely agree with Susanna. I think for the time being, the idea of intervals is something from the Neanderthal era. This is going to make Wagner and Strauss operas even harder to play, but we will somehow or other make it through. But the important thing is for everybody to have the confidence and for frankly, the institutions to survive while we make this difficult transition. But we mustn't miss the opportunity of saying, okay, what are we doing here and how will we do it? The LSO had next season an insane 99 days of touring. And this was hardly ever reasonable. I mean, it's frankly the only way they survive it.
It seems that it's certainly going to be a good time for one-act operas as well, I think. But Simon, before we leave talking about London behind and get back to Aix, you mentioned earlier how worried you were about how the British art scene will be by COVID-19. And I've noticed how many sectors here are really good at organizing themselves into lobbies, and yet classical music hasn't come together as much until recently, indeed, with some letters with your name on and things. But we need somebody like you to be the public face of a campaign. Is this something you've considered?
I'm sure everybody must be as bored of hearing my voice as I am, if not even more. We were advised at the point where the theatres were making a wonderful and remarkable amount of noise that now was not the time to make an equal amount of noise. So many of us had things. I mean, Mark and I wrote our letter a month ago. Fiona Maddox wrote her beautiful article, which appeared in The Observer yesterday. And I think at the point where it was clear that people weren't really listening, then is the time to make noise. But we have to make constructive noise. And part of the thing is we had to think, how now will we go about our life and what can be done? Yes, it's quite a time. But I had lunch, 35, 40 years ago with Peter Hall, and was asking him at the time where he was being attacked by Margaret Thatcher. I said, what's it like to have all this stuff thrown at you? He said, look, it's part of the job. It's awful. You get used to it. And guess what, mate? It's going to be your turn next.
Pierre, this crisis is so undeniably huge, but a lot of people are saying, and quite rightly so, that actually it is a chance for change. What do you think should be changed? And do you think that Aix and other bodies, similar organizations, will become perhaps greener in some way? What would you try to change first?
The festival is more agile, more flexible than an opera house. Aix was already quite advanced in being greener than certain opera houses in the way they built its sets or dealt with everything that needed to happen on stage. And I think in that respect, we will intensify what we had already begun, and quite successfully. As you know, we have a workshop that also builds sets and makes costumes. So that process will simply be intensified. But I think the profession was going through a kind of unhealthy frenzy before COVID hit. And I think this whiff of competition, arrogance, running ahead of things instead of thinking, I think that aspect of the profession is not something I personally enjoy very much. And I hope that this frenzy will be put into a new perspective after this crisis. Is what we are planning, what we are doing, does it really matter, and why does it matter? Be able to explain every project, reboot the motivation of other organizations that co-produce it and the artists that take part of it. So I feel that there is a chance there, and I think the real transformative lesson that will come out of this crisis, we will probably start to see happen in a couple of years' time. And I hope that more cooperation will come from this instead of more competition. I think that's what I'm hoping very much. And I think with more cooperation, we can make together a better case for why opera matters in this society, and also make opera part of all the priorities that seem to be emerging right now about how we should take more responsibility for things that are wrong in our behavior and which need to be fixed. And I think the arts, with all the healing potential, they are also sinners, and they have to also repent and rethink and reform. And that can only make the beauty of music making even stronger. It was incredible to listen to the concert of Simon the other day from Prague. The music sounded totally different. I was really in tears because in fact, I could see the music being played live at the same time on the screen, and it sounded and felt totally different. So, and that was not even yet experiencing a concert. We need to keep going. We need to stay optimistic.
Susanna, by definition of doing this new opera, you're one of the very first people to have conducted an opera since this crisis began. Are there any fears among the cast, or is everybody so positively committed that they just go for it? I mean, tell us what it's like rehearsing with singers already.
First of all, it's such a pleasure. I mean, to hear the human voice again, I mean, it's gorgeous. The festival has been amazing about really taking care of all the sort of sanitary conditions being correct, and we are wearing masks, we are sanitizing our hands all the time, and the singers are keeping a distance. You know, the directors telling them this is the moment when I would like you to hold each other, but of course we won't do that now. And so we're kind of playing with the imaginary power of it. And yes, as we have read, I mean, singing is a dangerous activity. You are projecting air, actually more than wind instruments. To be frank with you, actually, I have personally, there have been many moments when I've forgotten all about it. In the good sense, you know, that the music just takes over and then you're there. And since everything is so well taken care of, we don't need to worry. I mean, the conditions are fantastic and the rehearsals are not too long, and when the space is ventilated and so forth. So of course, this kind of cautions we probably need to go on with for a long time. To answer to your question, hearing singing is fantastic, and that's also sort of such an encouragement. You know, this is all what it comes down to, and that's why we love opera, and the human voice is there since thousands of years, or millions, or I don't know, but you know, that power hasn't vanished at all. On the contrary, storytelling has always existed, and it will, and there will always be I think, you know, contemporary opera especially, maybe there will be new stories to be told about this time as well. So who knows?
Pierre, I realise that all the productions that were planned for this year will be performed at some stage, but obviously not in 1 year. Will it be as easy to bring back the London Symphony Orchestra, for example, next year in the light of what's happening there? I mentioned politically. Are you surprised at what's happening politically, and how will it affect future relationships with these?
Well, I'm somebody who keeps my promises. This profession is great because of the bonds that can happen between people creating projects together, and there has to be trust. You have to stay the course. If you can't stay the course in this business, then you shouldn't be in it. And I feel that the most important thing I decided after this crisis arrived was to believe in what I had worked out with everybody and keep my promises and move forward to try to realize and lose nothing. And I think that helped me and the artists very much, because it gave us a roadmap. Instead of hesitating, changing the program, you know, getting into the terror of economic collapse, and you know, and I think being left in the end with nothing. So I think it's stronger to stick to the plan you had and to the promises you made. And I think that that's what we need right now. We need to keep the visions really sharply focused. Of course, Simon says, yes, we have to rethink programs. There will be more chamber music, etc. That's going to happen. But on the other hand, to completely, you know, throw the program of the next few years cross board and start from scratch is not an option.
Are there certain operas you plan to bring back next year, then the year after? Is that are you mixing and matching them a little bit?
Yes and no. I mean, certain projects are big, and we're wondering whether we'll be able to realize them. But I'm hoping that in a year's time we'll be in a very different place. I know there's no talk of a vaccine yet or a medicine. I have to try to believe that next year we'll be able to have a festival.
Simon, you talked about the incredibly ambitious touring program for the LSO next year, which obviously is at risk. But there are all sorts of issues, including visas and things that come into this now. Do you feel that Britain has become a very different country to the one it was when you signed up to the LSO.
The country is so split at the moment, and these last few years have probably made us realize part of the art's job is going to be to try to help put absolutely everything together. I mean, the arts are meant to be healing. And I think all of us have realized that we will have to be more local in the future. And it won't only be Greta who's happy about that. We will need to serve our close communities much, much better. And we will have to find out a way to survive while doing it. I'm sure somehow we will find a way to solve this. But it does require some kind of believable leadership.
One quick question for Thomas as well, because I'm interested in what you think that the virtual opera house, the virtual concert hall, these things are being a very, very useful substitute at the moment. Is there a danger, do you feel, of audiences becoming passive consumers of culture? Would you rather they came to the concerts, or are you happy to reach people this way?
Honestly, I'm not a big fan of all these video productions. Of course, they are helping to continue with music and save some productions, but in general, I'm quite sure. I remember when the CD was born, everybody was talking about, oh, we will have much less live concerts. The contrary was the point. And the more concerts we have, and even online, the more will the need is for the real live performance. I have a little remark to Simon, what you said concerning what we musicians can do and have to do in this crisis. And I was reminded 25 years ago, when I was working a lot with Witold Lutosławski, we had lots of political discussions. And I remember clearly that he told me, you know, Thomas, during this Solidarność and all this big change in Poland, the musicians has been the artists who only followed. Yeah? They have always been looking for the wind, and then they followed, in contrary to the actors, the writers. And I think if this is true nowadays, of course, we have to follow the general rules, but this COVID crisis makes it very, very clear that we also have to be very active and make our own rules. And this is what I'm doing in the last week, in a close connection with the governments, with the virology, with all these institutes. I was in contact, or I'm in contact with the soccer league in Germany. Why not find our own rules to make it happen? With testing, with a little bit of quarantine, not a little bit, but a clear way of quarantine. I'm sure when all the soccer leagues can play in a close contact, we musicians can play in a normal setting like the Vienna Philharmonic did 2 weeks ago. Why not? We have to make our own rules, of course, with a full responsibility for our musicians, but this is a situation where we also can lead.
When do you realistically expect to get back to something approaching a schedule of normal performances? Perhaps, Susanna, maybe you could answer first.
Actually, I'm very happy to say that it's not that far in the future. With the Helsinki Philharmonic, we had a beautiful tour coming up, and of course now those concerts are cancelled, but we are actually planning to open our season, but playing shorter concerts, but more of them. It's a kind of transitional activity. So I'm very much looking forward to be back in work in September in very special conditions. And then the orchestra will also be doing other projects. You know, we have been very, very fortunate with the city of Helsinki. They felt that the orchestra is an important part of the life of the city. So we had a common interest to be visible. So the musicians who are not playing, we will have those musicians playing chamber music concerts or you know, performing in venues where we can safely perform. And of course, from an organizational point of view, it's much more complicated for the administration to put this puzzle together. But I think it's also a beautiful example. I mean, the kind of belonging to a group has been stronger than ever. I mean, we had a wonderful think tank built quite instantly in March, where we discussed with the administration and with the musicians how we can be visible and relevant. And then gradually this idea of doing different activity, not less nor more. I mean, it's just that we're sort of spread around in smaller groups and so forth. That's what we are hoping to do. Of course, we don't know. Now we are end of June and it's a long way to beginning of September, but that is the plan at the moment. And no doubt the moment when we are meeting again will be very, charged with emotion, and we're hoping that it can work out.
Simon, what is your time scale for this? Whatever normal is, when do you think you'll get back to it?
You know, I'm an incorrigible optimist, but one of the things that makes me sad is listening to both Susanna and Thomas, because they have the absolute security that they are living in countries where the culture will be supported. I want to say that desperately. I think it will be much longer before we are in front of the public, and I think we will be doing exactly those same types of things much later. And I think we will use the time in between to do all kinds of things which are streamed, even though, as one of my friends said, look, all you do is songs in a room. Well, there are rather wonderful songs in rather magnificent rooms, but actually people have to be in the room. We have to breathe together. This is something which we can't wait to happen.
And Thomas, what's your timeline for that?
Here in Paris, it's quite strict. And as always in France, unfortunately, there's a lot of bureaucracy. In Germany, it's more easy, but not in each of the 16 countries. Very encouraging, North Rhine-Westphalia, with a fantastic Minister President, Armin Laschet. He goes forward and he allows us now to play with a full hall. I mean, in a way, we all have to live with the virus, I think, in the next 2 or 3 years. But we have to be brave. And the more brave the people are and have a good balance, being brave, being optimistic, and feeling responsible, the earlier we can play. And I'm sure, Simon, England, it's such a fantastic country. It's such a rich country. If you have a look at the stock market in England, so many people in London are even more rich than beginning in March. They should pay for the music. They should pay for your orchestra. They should help you over this year. This is a very, very simple solution to make very, very, very rich people understand that now the time has come to support the art.
I think in conclusion, please, I'd just like to go around everybody really asking very briefly for a favorite Aches Festival memory. And Susanna, I know this should have been your debut here, so it's maybe more like an immediate impression of Aches.
Well, I'm of course perfectly aware of the festival since a long time. For example, I remember very well a Valkyrie that Simon Rattle conducted here many years ago. Yeah, I've been coming. I was attending the world premiere of George Benjamin's extraordinary opera written on skin, and you know, it's a festival with a fantastic history and very vibrant and forward-looking. I can't pick a personal memory, but I'm very, very pleased that the festival is now in great hands and with a strong vision, and I'm sure it will continue beautifully.
Thomas, do you have a favorite personal memory?
Yes, I have two. I've been an ex as a in the public and was attending a wonderful, incredible performance of Popea, staged by Klaus Michael Grüber. This was such an amazing experience. And since that time, it has, for me, a dream to be an ex. And now the other memory has to do with you, Pierre. I think our conversation with SMS and with calling each other nearly every 2 days and fighting against the circumstances and ruling out things, this has been an incredible experience. And it shows me that it's possible to succeed and to come over even so difficult situation. And thank you.
Simon, you've got a lot of memories to choose from here too.
May I choose two? I mean, musically, the absolute highlight for me in the gorgeous Jeu de Paume Theatre, seeing Bill Christie, one of the great evenings of my life. And just very personally, the third of The Ring, Siegfried, the first night in Aix, was also the day my second son with Magdalena, Milos, was born. We'd actually flown in another conductor because I said, "What? I'm sorry. I know this is important, but I'm not leaving Magdalena to give birth." But in fact, I remember leaving the hospital around 1 on the day of the first night and going straight to the theatre and going into the pit in not the most entirely concentrated manner, as you can imagine, but seeing that the orchestra had put 2 gigantic teddy bears on the score of Siegfried. That is my memory, then followed by floating through it. This is a place that has happy memories, and it's a place that will have so many memories to come. And I would join with the others in saying to Pierre that he and his team's halos look very good on them, because they were never going to give up, and they did not give up. And we will keep this in our hearts forever.
Pierre, perhaps you can have the last word. Perhaps tell us what your first ever impression of Aix was. When did you come here first?
It was quite a long time ago, but it was also to do with Baroque music. I think it was Handel, the magic of that theatre, the Théâtre de l'Archevêché, had a huge impact on me. I missed, unfortunately, The Ring of Simon in those years, which I'm ashamed to say, but somehow I never imagined I would be one day a director here. It's something that surprised me, you know, at a strange time in my life. The last word I can really say is how grateful and fortunate we all are to have all those wonderful artists in Aix right now, working, enjoying the time to at least, you know, do something, be there, take part in this debate today. I think this is life-affirming, very important. It's a break, you know, reconstructing the future coming up. And I'm really, really grateful to see all those artists working right now on Innocence, for instance, so beautifully, and to see Simon there as a family man, in fact, in the city, but also supporting Madalena, and for me, and Thomas, who's finally there with his orchestra after all those exchanges. I mean, it's something different. It's really, it's very important. I feel we are doing something which is not routine. We're not sure where it's going to lead to, but we know it's important somehow. And I'm very, very grateful that everybody is here. And let's hope that together we can embody a certain optimism, which I think the arts really desperately need right now.
Well, thank you. That's a beautiful way to end. And on behalf of all listeners, including myself, thank you all very much indeed.
Thank you, John.
Thank you so much.